You know, one big problem that the pandemic created is we had a series of bad ideas that came to fruition, like the stimulus checks, like the not paying the mortgages, like the not paying the rent stuff, all those things. Companies saying it's okay for people to work from home and then they're not able to work from home. So there's a lot of bad ideas that stemmed from the pandemic that are now trying to be reversed. People now have to pay their rent, people have to pay the mortgage. And one of those bad ideas is debt forgiveness. Now, even though this wasn't a direct thing out of the pandemic, because of all of the economic hardship, we all know that the Biden administration pushed forward an effort to forgive all the student loan debt, which has failed time and time again, yet there have been a lot of people who have gotten student loan debt forgiveness. But right now, everyone wants their debt forgiven, regardless of what kind it is. But right now, 48% of student loan borrowers expect debt forgiveness in the future, guys. So pretty much half of people who are taking out student loans right now expect that at some point in the future, the government is going to come in and bail them out. And here's the thing, guys. Anybody who borrows any sort of money, regardless of what it is, whether it's a mortgage, student loan, credit cards, if you go into that loan with the anticipation and forward thinking that, hey, I can take out this debt and not have to pay it back, that's a huge mistake, because there's no guarantee that you're going to get any sort of debt relief in the future. And taking out, hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt, thinking that, hey, I'm just gonna not have to pay this back one day, this can really screw your life over tremendously. By the way, today I'm walking through China Camp. It's a park over here. I've seen a lot of people complain like, oh, everything is so dead and so brown. Like, well, the grass here is brown, guys, but inside the forest is nice and green. As you can see, it's beautiful in here. I would love to do more videos like this, like a hiking sort of video, but I have to find places where it's kind of flat like this in the forest, which is not that easy to find because hiking up a mountain and talking don't really work well together. You'd be hearing me huffing and puffing more than anything. And you guys can't expect it to be as green as Florida, okay? They don't get nearly as much rain here in California. Florida is always going to be greener than California. But on the flip side, you guys should be happy that it doesn't get much rain here, because every day is so nice like this. I'm able to come out and do these videos rather than being stuck inside my home office, making videos inside because it's pouring. So pros and cons. Now, I'm not going to go into how unfair the student loan debt forgiveness program is, because I've heard all the arguments already from you guys. We've talked this out before. I understand on the one hand, we give all this free money to foreign countries to help with wars we shouldn't be fighting and things like that. Why can't we help out, our students? Or we've given, billions of dollars to corporations as subsidies over the years, or bailouts during the GFC. Why can't we give it to our students? And I understand those arguments, okay? They are fair and legitimate arguments, but the reality is nobody should be getting those bailouts. Nobody should be getting debt forgiveness. And just because other people have in the past doesn't mean we should continue doing it moving forward, right? That doesn't mean just because we had bad ideas that we used before that we should continue using those bad ideas. But the problem is a lot of students are taking on a massive amount of debt right now. In fact, the amount of students that have six-figure balances have been exploding over the past couple of years. 80% of these borrowers that have six-figure balances, they owe between $130,000 and $140,000 in student loan debt, guys. They report feeling a very high amount of stress from their debt compared to people who only have student loan balances of $10,000 or less. They feel a much lower amount of stress. Like, yeah, you don't have a mortgage payment for your student loans. And I also understand that people borrow this money in order to get into a field that they think they're going to make a lot of money in, but sometimes that can backfire too. You have to be 100% sure that you're going to be able to make more than what your payments are going to be and still have enough money to live, and understand that going into any career, the starting pay is not going to be as good as you think in a lot of cases. And if you take on these high balances, you may even end up having to take on a job for the pay rather than what's aligning with what you want for your career. So I feel like everyone who's going to college these days needs to understand that there could be major sacrifices that need to be made on your behalf to pay off those loans in the future. And don't expect the government to ride to the rescue. Like, they may in the future, which hopefully they won't, because they shouldn't be rescuing anyone. It's not just students, but anybody. But even if they do, the chances of you getting your student loans forgiven when you have, $140,000 in balances is slim to none. In fact, most of the student loan forgiveness is reserved for people that don't make a lot of money. The Institute of Student Loan Advisors, they suggest that as a student, you should not borrow more than you expect to make as your starting salary. So say the starting pay is $50,000 or $60,000 a year, you shouldn't borrow more than that. And if you are, you're definitely over borrowing, and it's going to take you a lot longer to repay that than other people who are not borrowing as much as you. And this applies to parents too, because parents sometimes help co-sign for loans or encourage kids to get student loans, whatever. Realize that, your kid is going to be on the hook for repaying this loan, or you will if you're a co-signer. And just getting student loan debt is just the beginning, right? When you become an adult, say they want to buy a house, then they're going to have a mortgage, probably going to end up having a car payment, and if they can't afford their cost of living, then they're going to be getting into credit card debt or other forms of debt, and it just becomes this massive debt spiral where you're working just to pay the bills, even though you have a college degree. And I don't know anybody who wants that. I think we're also giving a lot of young people the wrong idea from the beginning too, that somehow debt forgiveness is something that should be in our framework, that, I borrowed too much money and I should be entitled to have that forgiven. Well, why? Because your fellow Americans, all of us who pay taxes, are going to be the ones who are going to be footing the bill for that debt. It's not like it just disappears or it goes away. All these times when you see your taxes go up, it's all due to programs like this. Obviously a lot of other things too, but every time you get a tax increase on anything, whether it's property taxes, whether it's your local sales tax, whether it's your income tax, all of that contributes to paying off these bills and these ever-rising expenses that no one seemingly wants to pay for. So the more we end up all borrowing, the more we all end up having to pay. It's that simple. And honestly, right now is a really tough time to be borrowing for student loans, because the fixed interest rates on federal student loans just climbed to 6.5% for undergraduate loans, which was up from 5.5% from last year. Everybody keeps calling for this rate cut from the Fed, but this is an example of the lag effect in motion right now, guys. Like, as school is beginning again, you're starting to see the student loan interest rates go up. Why? Because interest rates are still high. There has not been a rate cut, right? So all of the rate increases we've seen over the past couple of years are only just now catching up to student loans. And the last time people were paying student loan rates this expensive was back in 2013. June of 2013, it was 6.8%. Really, borrowing any money right now isn't the greatest idea with where interest rates are at. The average interest rate for a new car loan right now, 7.9%, according to Bankrate. 1 year ago, it was 7.18%. So it's almost a full percentage point higher 1 year later. And this is why you're starting to see different businesses and different parts of the economy start to crumble little by little because of this lag effect, because these interest rates are still permeating through the economy. And that's why so many people desperately want to have this rate cut, thinking that somehow as soon as the Fed starts cutting rates that all this is going to get reversed. Well, look how long it took to affect the economy in the upward direction. It's going to take the same amount of time for things to affect it in the downward direction in terms of rates coming down. But there is a high possibility that the Fed will be starting to cut rates very soon in September, like everyone is saying, because the most recent PPI report just came out for July, and of course the numbers are looking good in the Fed's direction. The PPI report, which is a gauge of wholesale inflation, just came in at 0.2% higher in July. So the year-over-year number is at 2.2% from 1 year ago. So it's getting very close to that 2% mark that the Fed is looking for. And remember, this is PPI. This is not the CPI number, but this is the Fed's preferred gauge of inflation. They can look at this PPI report and give themselves a pat on the back and say, hey, we beat inflation, when in reality the average person is still reeling from the inflation. But honestly, I don't think it really matters if the Fed cuts rates in September. In fact, that to me is going to just be the beginning of the end when it comes to the economy really going downhill. Like, there's been so many companies laying people off recently. Unemployment has been shooting through the roof. In fact, the SOM rule that I have quoted numerous times here on the channel was recently triggered because now unemployment is at 4.3%. and it went up 0.8 percentage points within the last 12 months. In order to trigger the SOM rule, it only has to go up 0.5 percentage points. So it has far exceeded the SOM rule now. And that SOM rule says that every single time it goes up 0.5 percentage points in a 12-month period, we are in fact in a recession or have been in a recession at least for a few months. So just that alone is undeniable evidence that the recession has already begun. And this is not something that can be fixed or, turned around with a simple Fed rate cut. Just if they cut rates in September, this isn't going to change anything. In fact, typically, every time they start cutting rates, that's when unemployment really starts to continue to shoot upwards. So I look at this as like if they start cutting in September, it's like, oh, finally that we're going to see this recession that we've been talking about for so long here on the channel, and I know you guys have seen on other channels on YouTube. And one thing that pretty much everybody was wrong about was the timing. Everybody thought the recession was going to hit last year. Well, if you go back to 2022, really that's when it kind of officially started, when we had those 2 negative quarters of GDP. But then we had this miraculous recovery in the stock market and the GDP numbers in 2023, and everybody thought we kind of dodged the recession. But in fact, what happened was so many companies were still able to take advantage of those high interest rates. They had a lot of cash in savings accounts and things like that where they were able to earn higher percentage rates than they've been able to in decades. And this actually ended up helping a lot of people rather than hurting them until now. Until now, when people need to borrow money, until now when companies need to refinance their debt, and oops, the rates are still high, now it's finally having the effect that we've all been looking for. And that's why a lot of economists, a lot of people out there are scared. They're like thinking, hey, the Fed is going too slow on this. They need to start reversing these rates ASAP before, we go into this economic downturn. Like, we're not allowed to have a recession. Everything needs to be rosy forever, which is unrealistic. But you guys just wait and see, don't take my word for it. Just wait when that rate cut comes and watch for yourself and see how nothing's going to get better overnight like so many people are thinking and hoping that it will, because that's just not the way that it works. What I'm going to be looking out for is when the Fed starts cutting rates, especially if they start cutting faster than we all anticipate they will. I'm going to be looking at the inflation data still to see, are the inflation numbers going to start going back up? Because I think there's a high probability they might, especially if they start cutting rates quickly. If they start bringing rates down faster than they brought them up, then there's a high probability that we're going to see a resurgence in inflation, and then they're really going to have their hands tied. And you can also see many different examples of how these higher rates are taking their toll on the economy. Like, so many companies with big layoffs right now. In fact, right here in the Bay Area, guys, across the bridge, San Francisco, they just had a company, technology company called Tally. They specialize in helping clients manage and pay off credit card debt. They just closed their doors and fired everybody. And you would think a company that's helping people pay off debt right now would be doing pretty good, considering how much debt people have. Maybe they're not doing good because people aren't paying off the debt. Ever think about that? And this is what the CEO says. This is a direct result of these higher for longer interest rates and how it ultimately puts businesses under, guys. This is showing you that this lag effect of the higher interest rates is finally taking its toll on the economy. This was not the outcome we had hoped for, but after exploring all options, we were unable to secure the necessary funding to continue our operations. That's a direct quote from the CEO. So unable to secure the direct funding means that they probably just weren't able to borrow the money that makes sense. They weren't able to get a loan at an affordable interest rate, just like people who are looking to buy a house, just like people who are looking to buy a car. It's everybody, including businesses. And what do? They just cease to operate. They close their doors forever and everyone loses their job. The Bay Area right now is actually getting crushed with lots of different companies closing and lots of different companies leaving the area. If they're not leaving the area, they're just closing down operations. Either one is not good. What's crazy is supposedly this company Tally that's closing their doors has a valuation of $855 million. So almost $1 billion company is closing down their doors. So, you could say just like a house is worth whatever you want. You can say my house is worth $5 million, even if there's no comparable sales to support it. You can say whatever you want to say that it's worth, right? But your house isn't worth anything more than what the next person is willing to pay for it. And same goes for this company. They can say it's $1 billion company, but clearly it's closing its doors forever and it's worth diddly squat, which means nothing. And that also further proves all the fake valuations we have with everything right now, with real estate, with businesses, with stock prices. This is the fake valuations in play right here. A company that's worth $1 billion should be able to save itself, right? If it's actually worth $1 billion, they should be able to get the right amount of loans or the right amount of collateral to save the business, or just file bankruptcy and liquidate a lot of their assets. But they probably don't have any assets to liquidate. So all this valuation is smoke and mirrors. It's just fake. Even Paramount Pictures, they just announced they're laying off 2,000 people. They're eliminating 15% of their workforce. Why? Because people are not paying for Paramount Plus, which is a streaming platform. There's so many different streaming platforms, and they all had this genius idea of like, well, we're going to beat Netflix at their own game, because what we're going to do is we're going to start our own streaming platform. That's why now we have Disney Plus and Paramount Plus and Peacock and whatever else there is out there, because they're all competing with Netflix. Instead of licensing their content to Netflix, they figure we'll pull everything off of Netflix, we'll have it all on our own platform, and they can just pay us directly. Well, that's not working out too well. So much so to the tune of that 2,000 people are going to be losing their jobs. And here's what Paramount said about this. This move is the result of significant changes in the TV and streaming marketplace and the need to streamline our company, which means that no one's paying for our services, so we need to eliminate jobs to keep our company afloat, which is what so many other companies are doing right now. And this is going to be pretty swift. This isn't going to be like Intel, where it's going to take until the end of the year. No. They expect 90% of these layoffs to be complete by the end of September. So this is already happening right now, guys. Within the next month and a half, all these people done. When you got all these people looking for debt forgiveness, they just want free money, all these companies closing their doors, it should make you stop and think for a minute, like, yeah, maybe things are not going as well as all of our leaders are telling us that they are. There's a clear motivation for the current administration to get reelected. There's a clear motivation for the other side of the equation to get elected. So you really can't believe anything you hear right now, except if you're listening to channels like mine, guys, because I don't have any bias. I don't have a reason to lie, In fact, one of my strong suits is telling the truth. When I was working in real estate, before I ever had a YouTube channel, my truth telling actually lost me several deals because I wanted clients to know the truth about a building, the truth about a listing, the truth about something in the transaction, rather than lie to them just to get the sale. And that ended up losing me money. And even though people thank me for it, I didn't get paid for that, So actually my truth-telling skills have actually fared better for me here on YouTube than they ever did when it came to selling real estate. Now another thing is EV cars, guys. A lot of people have bought EV cars and loved them, but it's kind of stopped there. A lot of people who have the EV cars now are kind of like the main customer base for all these companies, and you can't sell someone who has an EV car another one and another one and another one year after year, because they already have one and they're not going to be buying a new car every year, most likely. So just like any other type of business, the only way to grow is you have to expand your customer base. And just 2 years ago, Audi They announced their plan to become an electric-only car manufacturer by 2029, and they said they wouldn't launch another gas-burning car starting in 2026 moving forward. But because of how bad the EV sales and demand have been, they're actually changing their mind. It's so bad for Audi that they're considering closing down their entire manufacturing plant in Brussels. Where's Brussels? Is that Belgium? I think so. And if they close that plant, guess what? That's 3,000 people in Europe that are going to be losing their job because this whole EV dream is not working out the way that people thought it was going to. And you got companies like this that shoot themselves in the foot. You know, they swear off an existing technology into the future saying, oh, we're not even going to make this anymore. And now we're going to have to backtrack that and actually do exactly what they said they weren't going to do in order if they want the company to survive. So now what they're doing is they're going to launch a whole new range of gas and diesel powered cars, and they expect to keep selling them now until the European ban on combustion cars comes into full force in 2035. So Europe and California are trying to pull a stunt from the same playbook that probably isn't going to work. You know, 2035, guys, that's like 11 years from now. I really doubt that they're going to be able to pull off an all-electric future in Europe by 2035. People have already spoken. They don't want it. So how are you going to force people to drive these cars that they don't want to buy? So that also shows you it's clearly not just, you know, an American issue. It's not like, you know, it's just people in America aren't buying these electric cars. People in Europe aren't buying them either. So here's what Audi's thinking is going to happen. Audi thinks that as the deadline gets closer by like 2030 or so, that the European Parliament is going to postpone these regulations, and they're going to think about running the gas engines for longer than 2035, which I think is the most likely thing to happen. Just like this whole situation with the Florida condo deadlines, you know, having to get full reserves and all these buildings inspected by the end of this year, guys, is kind of unrealistic, to be honest. Like, it's good to have the deadline, but the reality is a lot of places aren't going to be able to meet this deadline. And maybe the state of Florida is going to hold firm on this, because you are seeing different condos completely get shut down and evacuated because they are unfit for living. So maybe they're going to take that hard-nosed approach and say, listen, you guys didn't do what you're supposed to do. Everybody knew this deadline was coming for 2 years, and you're just not going to be able to live here anymore. But if they try to take this same approach when it comes to gas-powered cars, it's not going to be as simple. And it's not just Audi that's actually scaling back their EV future plans because of the lack of demand. You also have Volkswagen. They are also scaling back their EV production. You have Mercedes-Benz, who's having a hard time selling their EV cars, and they're all like, wait a minute, we're a for-profit company. We need to make cars that people are going to buy. Here's what the chairman of Aston Martin has to say about this. He said, we've just felt a real lack of consumer demand, and we've seen and listened and read and heard what all the other big manufacturers are going through in terms of pulling back, that it's just not happening at the pace and time. Do I ultimately think we'll get there? Yes. Do I think it's going to happen as initially planned? Most definitely not. So he thinks that maybe we will see this eventual all-electric future one day, but it isn't going to be today or tomorrow. Another thing a lot of these car companies are doing is taking models that were planned to be all EVs originally, and they are modifying them to become hybrids, which I think is the smartest thing. And I think that's what a lot of people have said that they really want for now, is something in the middle, right? They don't want the full electric future. They still want to be able to rely on their gas engine, especially for range issues and things like that. And the ironic thing about this is, because more of these companies are going to continue producing new gas-powered engines, most likely a lot of people are going to continue buying those, and that's where they're going to see a lot of their sales figures, which is going to be even more of a disincentive for these companies to move to an all-electric future. And one thing I've said before, and I'll say it again, guys, is I'm not inherently against electric cars. I just want the technology to be superior to what we have now in every way, shape, and form, in order for it to fully take over gas-powered cars. Once they can easily drive further range than a gas-powered car, once they can operate in all types of weather condition without losing half of their charge, without having to stop you know, every couple hours to charge the car up on a long road trip, the different problems that plague them without electricity getting more and more expensive, even more expensive than gas in a lot of cases now. Just look what's happening here in California. Though they want everybody to have everything all electric, yet the electric bills are skyrocketing here. You know, you complain about the gas price, go ahead and pay your electric bill right now and see what that is. So just like anything else, it should become standard when it's ready. You know, clearly, whenever the DVD replaced the VHS tape, it was ready to be the replacement. There was no question that it was better technology. There was nothing better about having a VHS tape than a DVD. And that's why the adoption rate was so high, and it was a no-brainer. And now you can't even buy a VHS player anymore, because why would anyone want it? You know, unless you are a tech enthusiast and you want to buy some nostalgic stuff from the past, there's no reason anybody would want one. And that's where we need to get with vehicles. You know, it needs to get so good that no one will even want a gas car. That's the only way that this is going to work moving forward. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this nature walk with me. I know I sure did. It's beautiful to come out here in the forest and just enjoy the tranquility and fresh air. And I wish I had places like this in Miami to make videos, you know, like there are some parks and stuff, but it's nothing like this where it's just vast open spaces of nothing but forest, you know. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.